Okay, so today I'm going to be working on more of these Emperor's Children infantry. Here's the test model I've been working on. Um, this is what I'm going to use as the basis for all the other models in the squad. So today I'm working on this guy, and what I've decided to do is I'm going to make a black oil wash to kind of go over some of the metallic elements that I've been using. So I got that out. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to go, I have a brush that I have reserved just for using oil paints that can help preserve your other brushes. So I'm going to mix up just a bit of the black paint. Then I have to get some thinner that I'm going to use. And then I usually just use a pipette and put this in kind of slowly and see exactly how much I need to get the consistency I want. The other day I put a little too much thinner, and then I found that when I went to look at how the wash turned out after it dried, it didn't quite have the depth of color that I wanted. So this time I'm going to try to make it just a little bit thicker, see if we can really dull down some of those metallics. Okay. Put a couple drops in there. I feel like it thins pretty quickly, so you don't need too much, but on the other hand, the paint doesn't mix in super fast. I feel like you do have to work it a bit to get everything nice. Then I like to test it on the side of the cup, kind of watch how it flows. I think that's good for a thicker texture. And then for these oil washes, I use kind of an old cheap brush that I've kind of broken down the bristles a bit, but I actually find that this helps because those points on the bristle there actually give me like a really fine point for how I'm going to apply it. So here, let's start. There's some metallic trim on this model, and I only want in there. So there's a little hook on the bottom of that bristle. I can use that to get the wash just kind of in the area I want it. I'm also going to go through some of this black and gray ribbing that goes between the armor panels. That can kind of help break up those colors or help define the lines a little bit better. I do feel like the oil wash kind of comes off the brush really fast, and because of that, I do find myself reapplying it to the brush faster than I would normal paint. On the other hand, I take a lot off so it doesn't flow too quickly. So these areas are somewhat easier, but the kind of difficulty here is there's some panels that are right next to the part that I airbrush the pink and purple. So I try to be more careful with those areas because I don't want to kind of ruin the look I have. But the front here, I might have to do a little bit of kind of a recess shade on the pink and purple because if you'll see, there's an element here that's going to be metallic on that area, but it looks too cheesy, I feel, without some kind of wash to dull it down. So I'm going to put these here. So I'm going to try to carefully apply this, and if a little gets on the pink and purple, I don't mind, as long as it stays in the recesses. And part of the good thing with doing an oil wash is that you can go clean it up a little bit. So if a little bit gets in there, it won't be too bad. Yeah, it might just cloud around in there a little bit, and I will just go back later. Clean it up. Also gonna get this chain and some kind of in like the belly here. And then definitely on the bolt pistol, that I'm gonna coat completely. Really want to take it to kind of more of a dull gunmetal color and not so much this silver. I'm using Iron Warriors from Citadel as the base color. It is a darker metallic than a lot of them out there. I feel like they try to sell you silver right off the bat, and that's usually way too light for what I like. But I always take that, and then I do kind of a heavy black wash, sometimes even two, I feel, to really feel like I got See, I mean, even looking there, I feel that these kind of metallic coils now look a lot more realistic. I'm also going to wash over all the bronze here. Similarly, I've said this before, I feel like true metallics just often look too cheesy to me without something to kind of break them up. So I usually take them down with a wash pretty heavily dark, and then I highlight just really fine on the edge with the original color, and then on the highest points, maybe one of like if it's going from like a silver color, like the actual like bright silver, I'll just do on the edge, and then I'll do a similar thing with gold there on the bronze. And I feel like that will often help me achieve something that's quick but also closer to what I'm looking for. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit on the hand here. I'm gonna be painting the hilt of the sword later, so it's okay if I get a little bit there. I think that looks pretty good. What I'm gonna do is take a Q-tip and try to clean up that knee pad. So I'll show you how I do this. I always keep just a little bit of the thinner in the pipette so that I can wet the Q-tip afterward. And then it'll evaporate pretty quickly, so you don't have to worry about having too much in there. And I can just go clean this up. It's not going to be perfect. It actually took some of the silver off. I might have to do this a little bit differently. I feel like on this other model, it worked a little bit better, but the detail was a little bit smaller. It was a little bit easier to kind of get it just on the sides. I feel that if I can kind of go and touch that up. Now I'm going to take a dry Q-tip, just kind of dab off anything that's left. And then I'm kind of funny. I like to go back and forth and maybe tackle something till I'm happy with it rather than just kind of sticking to doing one element at a time. So I'm going to get a little bit of that base metallic and repaint that area real quick. I don't like seeing it messed up. Okay, thin it down a little bit. See if we can get this kind of just how I want. Or we've kind of messed this up. I feel like if it comes out a little worn, I don't mind. There's kind of like the perfection aspect of the Emperor's Children, but on the other hand, I like to have it look just a little bit rough because they've been fighting. It's been some time, and I think kind of keep the grim dark aesthetic so it's not too clean. I feel like it's one of my number one complaints about Space Marines in general is that I just really don't like when they're painted like super clean. I feel that it kind of takes away from the kind of frightening aspect that they're supposed to have in the lore. You know, whatever side they may be on, they're supposed to be like a force that is intimidating, and I feel like when they're painted very clean, they look almost like a different kind of sci-fi, in my opinion. Okay. One thing I want to do is I got a little bit, I painted this trim, but there's a little bit of pink it's kind of hard to see still here, so I'm going to clean this up. I think that came out how I wanted it. Do a little bit here. Okay. I missed a little bit of the chain with the wash, so I'm going to go back, do a little bit on there. Just to have everything be even. So there's this kind of second portion here on the other side of the sword. So I'm just gonna get a little bit in there. Even this side of the chain. Get a little bit more in here. Little gets on the black armor, you know, it doesn't matter. So what I'll ultimately end up doing is once the wash dries, like I said, I'll pick out some edge highlights with the original silver, and then I might just do kind of a bright edge, like just on the corner of, you know, some of the biggest elements, like on the gun or the chain. And that's kind of how I achieved the effects on this guy. It kind of just makes the final silver elements like pop. I noticed also here with silver, I did the guard on the kind of dagger on the belt. I'm gonna go through and do that too, since I already have some of the metallic color on my palette. One of my favorite elements on these guys is kind of these patches of skin. The first model I did, he has a small patch, but the second one has this big portion, and it was really fun to try to get the effect that I wanted. I started with a dark brown. I think I used Rhinox hide from Citadel, just to kind of base over the black because it'll be hard to paint it a lighter color. But I want to start with a more pallid color. So I think I used Rakarth flesh and Pallid Witch flesh to get the base color. And then after I did that, I went through with a red oil wash, and I used the red oil wash to kind of give this kind of general bloody feeling. I didn't want it to settle everywhere, so I took it out, but kind of left it mostly in the bigger recesses. And then what I did is I used some Reichland Flesh Shade gloss to give it kind of this appearance of having been like freshly pulled off or stretched over, and to contrast with the matte finish of the armor. And then once I had gotten that, I wanted the areas where each of these kind of pins, these like metal bolts that are holding it together, connect to look a little more like bruised. So there's this kind of idea that maybe the skin here when it was fresh is kind of like stretched over these pins. And so I took a little bit of a reddish wash then, but not pure red like the oil wash I did, but more of a like a purple bruised color. And I just did one dot of that color over each of the bolts. And I think it kind of gave a nice texture across the whole thing. And ultimately, I think I'm going to replicate that process for the rest of the army because a lot of them have these kind of skin elements. And the one on the shoulder, I did the same, but I just left a lot of it except the flesh color off the top. That way, it would kind of be, again, more of the distorted colors being around where it's stretched or tied down. So I think one thing I'm kind of really bad about is just forgetting small elements and then having to go back and do them later. But I think part of that is I'm not a big fan of like super like a batch painting style. I like to do all of my airbrushing across the squad, kind of get everything situated, and then tackle one or two models at a time, kind of flitting back and forth between whatever element I want to do at the time. I feel like it kind of helps me stay interested by having a different focus, you know, as I go on. And then I also think that even when I'm batch painting, I'll tend to really forget certain elements, like, you know, this small thing like here, the metal cap on this tassel. And then when I do that, and then I have to go back and touch up each model individually after being batch painted, I kind of feel like, why didn't I just tackle them in their own right? So I don't know. It's a much slower process, but I feel like for me, it just ends up being more fun, and I'll be kind of a slow painter anyway. So I'm also really bad about letting everything completely dry. But like this chain here to me feels like it could be at a good place, at least to just kind of get some highlighting. So I'm just going to use the edge of my brush and just kind of pick out the top. excuse me, the top part there. And I'll use that. And then I think on these little pieces here, I just kind of like to do a highlight on the top edge. I mean, you kind of can't get down with every one of the little grooves, but just kind of make it look like light is hitting the topmost spot there. I'll also do these chains here. And I'll hit the top of these little like power inlet things. If I do all of this, this is one of my favorite parts, is when you highlight after the wash, I feel like everything just kind of jumps out. The bolter will be, or the bolt pistol will be a little bit more. So to keep it light, I need a little more paint on my palette. Kind of thin that down. Okay. So here I'm gonna do a little bit more of the original color, and then just try to avoid the kind of like middle of each section. So we can go over this raised element, I think, a lot more though. It's gonna stand out anyway. And then sometimes I paint more from like the directionality of the light, and sometimes I focus more on what I think just where a good highlight would be. Like here for the barrel, I can't coat the whole thing or to look kind of back to the original color. So I originally did the light coming down this direction. So I'm going to have kind of the same view for how I highlight this. It's kind of just like pull back and put the model on the table and see where it would make sense. Like on the side here, we can hit some of those. Okay. I'm gonna touch up this knee pad a little bit. Now, I'm gonna go in here and try to highlight some of those metallics. We dulled down on the front. Trying to hit the front edge of all of these pieces of the chain. And then I'm going to go through on the belt buckle again. Okay. Okay. I saw I spilled a little bit of that oil wash on the shoulder panel. So I'm going to take a Q-tip now. I'm trying to carefully see if I can get that off. Sorry about that. I have a DSLR camera that shuts off after about an hour. You just have to press a button. Okay. Well, it's nice that cleaned up really well. So now, I'm trying to decide what I really want to do next. I think I might clean up some of the tassels and also highlight the leather. I think we'll start with the leather. It's a little bit quick. Okay. I'm going to kind of redo just a little bit on the pouch and the belt since I've done a lot of work in the area. They've gotten a little bit smudge, so we got that area there. Got this area with the belt, or the pouch, I mean. The belt's up here. Okay. And then I'm going to paint the handle of the sword, I think. Yeah. That's how I did it in the test model. Kind of left it darker on the grip and then on the guard, or the guard, like the back of the grip, I highlighted up to a lighter brown. I'm gonna come in here from the front. Just make sure I get the whole thing there. Okay. I'm gonna take some lighter brown. I'm using a light umber from Pro Acryl. I'm gonna mix that with the base brown I was using, which is Rhinox Hide. It's definitely one of my favorite browns for like a dark brown. So I'm gonna do about a 50-50 mix. So get a little bit darker. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna paint the outside of this handle. Get some more on the brush. Kind of highlight there. Highlight the top of the belt. Highlight that little piece. Then I'm gonna hit the kind of top area of each face. This color isn't going to be too far from the base color, so I can kind of apply it loosely. And then I'll go into kind of like a more stark edge highlight once I get the base where I want it to be. So I'm going to mix in a little bit more. Then I'll just do like this. Okay. Take some manipulation here, but I'm going to get to the top edge there. Okay. I feel like that is good. And then we'll go up to this kind of lightest stage. We'll just put this on the corners. Okay. I'm going to take just a little bit of a cream color I have left in my palette and kind of mix up just a final highlight. I'm going to put that right here. I'm going to do a little bit on the pouch. A little bit on that corner. And we'll do some on the front. Get a little more on my brush. Okay, and then I'm just going to clean up the side of the pouch where the edge highlight went a little too thick. And get some of that kind of mid-level color in there. Okay. Let me adjust my focus real quick. Okay. Then I'm going to clean up some in the back here. You know, I was told when I first got into the hobby, I had all the models I'd purchased for my first army, which is going to be Dark Eldar or Drukhari, I guess as they're known now. And I had them all in like sub-assemblies, and I was saying, oh, I can't play because like when I go to paint these, just how will I like reach, you know, in between the gun and their chest or, you know, whatever. And I remember the owner of the store was like, well, if you can't see it, you don't need to paint it. And I know that's become kind of like a popular piece of advice, but at the time I was like, no way. Doesn't that feel like a waste or like you're not doing a good job? But ultimately, as much as I'd like them to be like really perfect, you can't, it's almost like you can only do so much. I mean, unless you're trying to go for like a real centerpiece model or something, I think that just kind of focusing really on what you can see the most is probably your best bet. Okay, there's one more of these little caps to the tassel, or two more I could use. A bit more. Then what I think I'm going to do is on this one, I'm going to paint the tassels and kind of some of the bluish green that I've been using across these models as like a highlight or accent color. Kind of also help reveal where I need to clean up on the cap of the tassel. Okay. So that's one, and then we'll go and do this one here on the foot. I originally was going to do all the tassels like an even brighter pink than the rest of the armor, but ultimately I don't feel like there was enough for them to stand out well doing it like that. And so I kind of decided that maybe for this one we'll go ahead and try doing the accent color instead. Okay. I think that's good for this section. I'll just highlight. So for that kind of blue-green, what I've been starting with is Citadel Stegodon Scale Green, which is a color I really like. But then we've just been using green by Pro Acryl. Sometimes in some other ways with Cabalite Green from Citadel and Bright Green from the Rogue Hobbies collection. Sometimes I'm bad and don't write down like a color recipe, but ultimately I feel as long as I can kind of achieve what I want, that's okay. I think that all these different versions of green kind of help me create different levels. You'll see that if I show you the example model here, there's the bottle on the thigh is kind of highlighted up as high as I'd want to go. But like the hair is a similar combo, and actually the sword is a similar color. And so I just kind of vary the use of these different greens in order to achieve different effects. Like the swords, I stop at Stegodon Scale Green and just kind of mix it with a cream color to get like a lighter blue. For the hair, I just mixed up to the Pro Acryl Green, but for the bottle, I highlighted all the way to the bright green, and then I added a little bit of white to kind of do the bubbles and the effects on there. And so by switching out the different greens that we can use, we can achieve different effects. So for these tassels, I'm really just going to only go up to maybe the Cabalite Green, and then maybe just like a final highlight of the Pro Acryl's like base green. I'm not going to do these too crazy because they're just a small element, but I really feel that the pop of this green color kind of adds some kind of contrast to the other elements in this model. I'm not a fan of the super like pink and green color schemes. Like I don't want to, it's like the Joker colors, and I just feel like that's too much. But having like one element that pops a little bit, I think can be really fun. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to get just a little bit of the Pro Acryl Green. Okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna do just a little highlight there. Just a little highlight there. And then just a little on this side. I think that this helps is you don't have to pick out every hair, but just kind of having a highlight. So if you look at it from each angle, you can kind of get all of it. Oh, thank you for the follow. I'm painting my first set of characters, still enjoying the lore and better ways of painting. Yeah, I feel like it's such a really exciting thing to get into it. Recently, I've gotten my wife into the hobby, and we've been watching some lore videos, things, and sharing that. And it's really funny because I feel like I've been in the hobby for like so long. It's just like all this stuff that I've like internalized. But it's really fun to see kind of someone getting into it. And then I really believe in like choosing the army based on like what you like in the lore and like aesthetics, really. So whenever any of my friends or people like talk to me about it, I just kind of really encourage them to kind of chase what they think is cool and what they think they're interested in, and let that inform their painting. Because I'm like, at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you're not going to enjoy painting it. But like for the Emperor's Children, I said that I wanted to do this army back in, I think it was like 2012. I was at a game store and I was really interested in chaos, but I thought at the time I was like, oh, there's only this one kind of upgrade set for regular Chaos Space Marines to be Noise Marines. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll wait a little bit longer. And then they did I think they released Magnus first and updated Thousand Suns. And I thought, oh, if they're going to update each of the Chaos Gods in Chaos Space Marines, like I'm definitely going to wait for the Emperor's Children. Well, sure enough, they were last and released in 2025. But I think that makes it exciting when you really like enjoy the stuff, even if maybe it's a long wait for your faction or whatever. But yeah, I think Ultramarines can still be like really interesting, and I think what's great is that you get the kind of huge amount of lore that comes with them being such a popular faction, and a lot of options. I think painting wise, it's fun when you can do a lot of different units and playing the game. I feel like even with the Emperor's Children release, that it's kind of a much more narrow range of units. But if you're doing Ultramarines, I mean, like there's all kinds of stuff you can do. Um, do you think that you're gonna do it more like the really like clean style, or do you think you're gonna do it kind of like more like a grimdark or like grittier style with the Ultramarines? Like I think both ways can be interesting. I mean, I prefer the kind of grittier style. I've While I wasn't like too much of a regular Space Marine fan, recently watching the like secret level trailer, just I was like, wow, that's so cool, and I really liked kind of how they really capture that kind of like grimdark vibe. I think that it's like one thing I think you can do is kind of even how I've done the Emperor's Children here is if you want to do like the base color like pretty clean, and then what I like to do is say take all the metallics or things and do a lot of like washes. Like I do a bunch of black washes and things to really kind of dull down the colors and then do some bright highlights. And then I feel like it makes your main color, that would be like the paint on the armor panels, really pop. But at the same time, then everything else kind of has this vibe of being not too flashy. And I think that also helps like your main colors stand out. Because I think what's hard is sometimes when you have a really bright color, like say the blue for the Ultramarines, but then metallic trim or things will also be really bright, and then it can kind of it looks like a lot. So I feel like sometimes it's just taking the details down a little bit. And then I think the other fun part is kind of choosing your highlight color. Like here, even like I really enjoy watching people paint like the eye lenses, some like the really creative ones, even for like Ultramarines or other groups, because kind of that contrast of maybe like a red is super fun. Oh, okay. Well, I've never played regular Space Marines. I got a box set a long time ago that had some, and while I was waiting for my Emperor's Children to release, I actually painted or started painting up a couple as Black Templar because I do think of the Loyalist factions. They're definitely one of my favorites. And I feel I really like the kind of the vibe of the color scheme. And I'm kind of a big fan of black and red. If you see in my banner, I painted my slaves to darkness in a kind of black and red color scheme, with the highlight color being like a bright blue, because I did kind of the classic ice bases. And I really enjoyed, because I found like a formula I liked for the red. I think corn red is my favorite from Citadel. And then you can really highlight, they have these capes, and highlighting all their red capes is like really fun. And I felt like when I was painting some of those Black Templar models, painting their trim or other elements with that same kind of really bright, like poppy red over the black was just really fun. Um, and then I feel for like Adeptus Mechanicus, there's some of my favorites from the lore. And so I did really want to play. I kind of want to play every faction. I'm going to be honest. Like over the years, I've done all kinds of things. I got someone gifted me a model once, but I ended up actually giving it to another friend because he was interested in playing them. Um, I did get a couple of the like Skitarii models of the very first Kill Team box. Like when Kill Team was brand new, it came with a unit of them and a unit of the kind of generic Gene Stealer cult models. And I actually ended up painting the Gene Stealer cults first. Let's see. Yeah, I totally agree. I like. I mean, maybe it's a little bit cheesy, but definitely like the Crusade vibe, like and them making that like their whole thing. I think is really fun. One of the things that my favorite about like 40K is it being kind of like a sci-fi fantasy. My first faction was Drukari, or then they were called Dark Eldar, because I mean, in kind of like in like high fantasy, I'm like a big fan of like elves, but even in more like grounded fantasy, I'm a big fan. And I think that that's kind of something that really comes through with that group. And maybe that's where I'm like, I can see the appeal of Ultramarines, but they sometimes feel very like modern. But I feel like kind of the aesthetic of Black Templar, or this idea of the Crusade, kind of draws on that kind of fantasy history. And I feel like that's what kind of makes me like interested in them as a faction in that way. But I feel I've also really wanted to play Trench Crusade lately. I really love the models. And I also think kind of the historical vibe does that. Also those vibes. Yeah, I see Thousand Suns, another I really love the Chaos Space Marines, like in general. And I think of the Chaos Gods, I think Tzeentch is very interesting. I've always kind of, when I play like a any kind of like RPG or something, I always like to be like a magic user. And so I kind of like the vibe of Thousand Suns kind of being like this. It's kind of these like space sorcerers, but it's also like kind of like ancient at the same time. I think that makes them like really fun. Okay, what am I? Let's see. What do I want to do next? I'm gonna paint a little bit of black. I need to put some more in my palette. The Tao's been around a long time. I had a friend back when I was in high school. So this was like 2012. And he was really into Tao. And he got some of the models, and we'd often like proxy a lot of models because we couldn't afford them at the time. But he ended up buying a starter box, and I was excited because I do think Tau are really cool. Being such a ranged faction at that time, the rules were crazy. I don't know exactly what the Tau rules are now, but at the time, effectively, I had only like melee units, and if I ever go to make a charge, he just gets so many shots, he could destroy every unit before they would get there. So they were kind of funny to play against, but I like the idea of the gunline kind of play style. And then, but I thought it was really sad. So my friend buys the starter box for them. It's kind of like the Combat Patrol of now, but like it was a different name then. And at that time, they were exactly $100. And when he bought it, his parents got so mad at him, he like never built them. And he ended up like 10 years later, he gave them to me. So I have these towels that I could paint, but I think one day maybe I'll get around to it. I've seen some where they paint the town models like Tron, like with the light, and I thought that's like a really cool scheme. You have the intro set. Oh, okay, yeah, I is it the one with the Tyranids? I think that's out now. I think that's really cool to me. When I started it, the intro set came with orcs, which okay, yeah, like I felt like the orcs were like okay, but they're not like my favorite faction. But I've always really enjoyed Tyranids, and I think that it's cool that they made them kind of the kind of like villain of this edition in the starter box. Um, I really wanted to do Tyranids way back when I got into the hobby, but at the time I was just kind of weighing out the price of models because I was just a kid at the time, and I felt that ultimately Tyranid models were more expensive than Dark Eldar that I was playing at the time, and so I decided not to. But I've always thought they're very fun. I feel what I enjoy about Warhammer in general is that there's just a lot of ways to like engage with the hobby, and I think that's why I think a lot of people are getting excited about it now. It's just like I've read many of the novels, I've played the games, I've painted, quite a lot. Like painting's my favorite, but I feel that on one hand it can be intimidating, but also sometimes I get excited when I get into a hobby and there's like a ton of stuff to learn or a ton of stuff to research or read about on a wiki or watch videos. And excuse me. So I feel like yeah, like it can be a lot, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of what I want. I feel like when I look at like a game or something, I want a lot to like sink my teeth into, you know. But I feel like at the same time, that's what I was saying about like kind of introducing my wife to the game. Just this kind of idea that I've been playing for like I guess like 14 years, but I feel like it just kind of you absorb so much of this lore that sometimes when you're talking to people, it just feels like this lore dump. You're talking about all these things. I was actually showing my brother-in-law the secret level trailer, and I was naming like the enemies there. I'm like, oh, that's a Lord of Change. It's a Greater Demon of Zinch, or it's like this or that. And I felt a little self-conscious. I'm like, oh my goodness. I never thought about like how funny it must sound like somebody like doesn't know all the units just be able to name them all. But yeah, you chose Ultramarines because they're based off Roman history buff. That's really cool. I like history too. My major in college was actually Japanese history, so I definitely like really enjoy those things and elements of them in the things I work on. And I kind of like the kind of quasi history of like Warhammer, like deep in the lore. It kind of blends with like real life history in some of those groups, and I think that uh, makes for kind of a fun a kind of like a fun basis, the kind of like imagining that like, oh, is this like the future in our own universe, and then things from our universe apply. It's not really like a spoiler, but like there's this one Warhammer novel I really enjoy, and I was like shocked when I get in there and someone goes into this store and they have like antiques, and one of them is like a rocket from like the Soviet Union, like a toy that was like painted like that, and it just kind of makes it feel like it's connected, and I think that's really cool. Oh, okay, computer science. Yeah, my brother-in-law there's in the video too. He does computer science, and when I was in college too, I did IT for the university. I'm not like super, knowledgeable, but it's definitely something that I like enjoy talking about. And so I feel it's kind of the convergence of I feel that people into like a lot of different things can kind of like apply their interest to the hobby because it presents kind of so many avenues. And I think across the different factions, different lore, there's things that appeal to people differently. Okay, so I think I'm actually going to highlight the metal here. So on the kind of coppery color here, I'm going to go back to the original color, which is uh, Bathazar Gold by Citadel. So I'm going to put some of that on the palette, and then I'm also going to do I use this sparingly. But auric armor gold. Uh Power armor from Fallout. I could definitely see it. You know, to be honest, I feel like in middle school I was like a big Fallout fan. Like that was my thing. And then I feel like in high school, I gotta reset this. Sorry about that. So yeah, like I feel like in high school I got really into Warhammer, and I do feel like the power armor kind of like fantasy is like a big part of that. Um, I also feel like a big reason that it might be is that the older like Horus Heresy power armor has the kind of like beak like thing, which is the same, and I forget what it is in Fallout, the name, but they have that kind of older armor style as well that has the similar kind of like beak like shape. And I'm like, I feel like that's a little too close. Yeah, yeah, the one in the cover Fallout too. So in my mind, I think it'd make a lot of sense. Okay. All right. So in here, I'm just gonna do an edge highlight of the original bronze. Okay, so the Emperor's Children are one of the original like Space Marine legions, and I think okay, so if I back up a little bit, I read a novel, one of the Horus Heresy novels, when I was just getting into the hobby, and it had about this one guy who was a member of the Emperor's Children who tried to like save everyone when they fell to chaos, like they become like the villains. But and so I got more interested and decided to learn more about the lore and read some more of the books. So the idea is that there's the four chaos gods. They're the ones that have fallen to Slanesh, and it's because they were they considered themselves to be like the most perfect of the Space Marine legions. Like in everything they did, they wanted to be the best, right? Sorry, let me take a sip of water. And it also didn't help that in kind of the lore, it's that uh, when they were first kind of creating the Space Marine legions, a bunch of the Emperor's children's were like lost, so they had very few numbers. And so, of the ones that were remaining, they kind of took it upon themselves to do the best because they were allied with other Space Marines. And so didn't have enough numbers to work on their own. And so they kind of had to prove themselves. And then I think the third element is that the humans that were used to make the original Emperor's Children Space Marines were all like the noble born children on Earth. And so it was kind of like, you know, the wealthy elites who like valued like art and poetry and sports. And so the Emperor's Children on top of like war were all about kind of being best in all of those areas as well. And that was the same of their Primarch is Fulgrim. And so he was kind of considered one of the best like the best swordsman of all of the Space Marine Primarchs. And there's a lot of stuff that obviously happens, but ultimately they go to this world and it's being run by this alien race that's extremely strong. And they're kind of warned that, this group is too hard to fight. Like they might have to wait for help or leave them alone. Well, the Emperor's children don't want to back down. So they go and they fight their way to the center, losing almost all of their troops. And in the center of this like alien planet is like this essentially this like legendary sword. And Fulgrim picks it up, but turns out this sword was possessed by like a demon of Slanesh. And the idea was that like Slanesh had corrupted this whole world of these aliens, and that's kind of what made them so strong. And eventually the demon actually becomes so strong, it possesses Fulgrim's body, and he's kind of like kicked out for a while. And during this time, the Horus Heresy happens, and they kind of turn evil, and then they have all this stuff. And then during the battle on Terra, like at the end of the Horus Heresy, actually Fulgrim transforms into like a demon prince of Slanesh, grows this like snake-like body, and he actually kills the Primarch of the Ultramarines uh, with this kind of like magic poison, right? That's why they put him in stasis for like thousands of years afterward, or why he wasn't in the game, was because he's like mortally wounded by Fulgrim. But then after that, Fulgrim just kind of goes off, and the Emperor's children do too, and they become kind of like so evil. They're more interested just in like looting and destroying worlds and capturing prisoners, that they kind of break apart. And for 10,000 years, they're not working together, and they're all kind of seeking their own ends. But it's kind of in the lore, like right now, they've kind of banded back together. And part of it is Fulgrim, hearing the Primarch of the Ultramarines has been like resurrected, is on a quest to kind of like kill him again. So I think that's like it's a pretty cool reason. And the idea is that they've taken their idea of perfection so far that now they do all these like depraved things, and they're like super evil. And that like they have this joke that when they're in Terra, they like grind up the citizens and into like space drugs, and then that somehow makes them go like, fight even harder. It doesn't make any sense, but it's just kind of silly. Or like in their new codex in the lore, there's like this tidbit in the margins where it's like, there's this crystal dust that some Emperor's children sprinkle in their eye socket, and that this dust kind of grows crystals through their eyes and into their brain, causing like extreme pain. But at the same, and it like kills many of them, but some of them can like master this like living crystal that replaces their brain and like work with it to become stronger. So like I think every bit of lore in the codex is just something like absolutely insane, of like body horror for themselves or the people they capture. But at the end of the day, I just kind of like playing as, I'd say, like the evil races. I mean, that's why my first army was Drukhari too. I just think kind of playing the ultimate bad guy feels really fun. But I know a lot of people think that the Emperor's Children are a little too much. Okay, so anyway, I did the highlight of the original bronze color, and now I'm gonna just do a very sparing highlight of the like really high gold. I'm just gonna do that in kind of like the tip or the edge of each section. It's just when you look at it from behind, it'll just kind of make it really pop. Yeah, I feel there's no good guys. And I think a lot of people will say that because they don't want anyone to be like think that the Imperium or that humans are good. But I'm like, on the end of the day though, they're also not as bad as like the Emperor's Children per se. But I like that the kind of the theme with Warhammer at the same time is often that it's people trying to do good, just kind of becoming corrupted through their own desire to do the right thing rather than maybe just being purely evil, or through very like human characteristics. I think like a lot of the Primarchs or things, so well, people make jokes about them. Their stories are written well, and I think that it's kind of reasonable to see that like, well, they're people too. Like they're given the bodies of being like gods, but they're also still there for like human emotion, and that can kind of lead to their downfall. So anyway, look here real quick. So having these kind of the dull bronze, the mid bronze, and then the highlight of the gold just kind of adds a lot of dimension to this backpack without making it look kind of like too gaudy. Okay, so that's the backpack done. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and highlight the dagger on this guy. So for that, I might have said it before, but I use Stegadon Scale Green, and where did I put it? I use Bright Ivory from Proacro. On my test model here, I actually did something a little bit differently. I used a really saturated blue at the bottom to give a little bit more depth. I'll show you here. It's a little hard to see, but down the bottom of the blade, instead of having it just go into the Stegodon scale green, I played with this blue. I wanted it to look different from the other sword that he's holding, so I might try to do something similar this time around. So for the sword in the hands, I used an airbrush and masking tape. I remember one of the first techniques I ever saw that someone did that was their Grey Knights like power weapons, where you kind of have a gradient going opposite directions. And I really like that, but I don't have an opportunity to use it on a lot of models. So I thought I would try it out on this guy, or on these guys, to add just a little bit more interest to their swords. Like, they're technically just kind of mundane swords, but I feel like when I'm painting, I want things to look cool. So this is a little hard. I just want to paint the edge of the blade. Actually, I might get some paint on the side I'm not trying to paint, and then I can just go over that with the Stegonon's scale green. Okay. You know, that comes through. I think to some extent that worked pretty well. I don't know if you have heard, anywhere else on the internet or people, but in terms of there being like no good guy or about really the kind of, I think just the best like novels in general, the Eisenhorn trilogy, it really deals with that concept and has really, really got me like invested in the game and everything. Because it really explores kind of, I don't know, maybe like the morality, the worldview, like behind the story through the main character. Over, he has a trilogy. Then there's like a second trilogy about like his like apprentice, and then there's a third trilogy with two of the books out. And between book one and book two, there was a 12-year gap that I waited. But honestly, that series is my favorite, and waiting for that final book is probably my number one like wish list item in terms of Warhammer. Here I'm just trying to blend just roughly the colors. Well, I like my guys to look cool. I also don't try to be like too much of a perfectionist. If the gradient's pretty good, it's pretty good, especially for infantry like this. I feel that, if you're painting a character, something you really want to take the time, you can. But I just realistically, I'm already going very slow for these guys. Okay, so now I'm making kind of a thicker glaze of that this brighter blue, and I'm going to apply it just at the end of this sword. Maybe a little bit more. That'll kind of let me add just some depth and some variation. Then what I might do is do another oil wash. This time with a turquoise. Okay. So to clean the brushes for the oil wash, because you can't like dip in water, I use a pipette, and I just apply some of the thinner to a paper towel, and then I just kind of clean the brush like this. It works good enough. So then I recently was in Washington visiting some family, and I went to a hobby store there and found that they were selling these kind of cool colors already in oil for a big discounted rate. Like I think it was like more than 50% off. And they were already only like $9. So I got them for only a couple dollars, which to be honest, for like was cheaper than most paints. And I was able to get them in some really interesting colors. I got a magenta that works really well. But what I really love is that this turquoise, it kind of works not quite as bright as I'd want, but very close to like a power weapon or what am I thinking of? Specifically like a plasma gun. And so it's fun because you can kind of get an effect really quickly for something like that. I need a little bit more thinner here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is on this sword that's near, let me move this to the side. On the sword that's around the waist here, it's a little bit hard to see. Let me see if I can get it. There's some like inlaid detail. And I'm just going to touch in this oil wash here. See if I can get a little more on the brush. Okay. Ooh, that's a lot. Okay. Go here. I'm going to take a Q-tip. Just kind of dab off the excess here. A little bit too much. Sometimes this is a little bit of a back and forth. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now there's a little bit too much on one spot, but I can clean that up. And what this does is it kind of makes that inlay detail really pop, where I would say is before it didn't really even like show up on the camera. So I think that makes for a nice change. Okay, I'm gonna put the oil wash away and clean the. One thing I was struggling with was having containers for the oil washes. I had some glass jars, but I quickly found that once I put a color in one, it was a little bit difficult to clean. So I got these little 3-ounce cups on Amazon, and they've really made it a lot easier. So I can kind of just keep one for each color now that I have several colors to use. Oh, we got a little on there. I'm gonna go back to my Q-tip here and remove some of that. Put that off to the side. Okay, very cool. Put some black down. I'm going to clean up a little bit of this. I'm going to make just a little bit of gray. I just want a tiny highlight on one part. It's really hard to see. There's this cable that runs down here. Okay. Oh, there's one piece of black to clean up too. When I was highlighting the bronze, I got a little bit of the color on here. So I'm going to take this black, clean that up just a bit. Clean a little bit up on there. Then we're going to go back to Stegadon Scale Green on back of the sword here because we messed this up a little bit. Okay. It's looking pretty good. I think I'm getting about ready to do the head, and then he'll be pretty much complete other than doing my base design. I'm just taking a second here. Okay. Just one more thing I want to clean up here. Okay, so now we have two more things to do, and that's one is to work on the head similar to the test model. And then after I'm finished with that, to make another one of these bases, which does take a little bit of work. But I think we'll start with the head. So let me see what I'm going to use. I don't use like a painting handle. I feel like I've always been a little too cheap for that. I just tend to use something else. Let's see if this is within the frame. Okay. It's a little bit hard to get the detail on the head just right. Maybe something a little bit smaller. Guess actually. Okay. just gonna do a simple metallic for the decoration on the head here. Did it kind of somewhat similarly for the other model. And then I have to decide exactly how I'm gonna do the detail on the rest of the head. I like having the black details. I don't want to do it all metallic, even though there's a lot more decoration on here. So I think what I'm going to do is do silver up here, and then do silver on the grill kind of thing. And then I'm going to do the eyes. And I know about these tubes. Actually, I'm going to take gray, and I'm going to highlight. Or let's just try it. I can always paint it over black. Okay, so I'm going to paint each of these tubes that go around the helmet with a metallic. And then I'm going to go and highlight the black, and then I'll do the eyes. Well, also I'm going to do a black wash on the silver elements to bring them down a little bit so I can highlight. Doing the helmets and faces is always a little intimidating, but I feel like with my test model, I was really happy with how the face came out. I was able to do the lenses pretty well, and I think the colors broke up well. So I'm trying to do something similar with this one. Before I do the gray though, I'm going to just clean up a little bit of the black here. Just make sure it's pretty solid. With some of these elements that kind of go into the parts that are airbrushed, I don't want to do be too heavy-handed and have it run into those areas. So tend to start out simpler. Okay, let's get a nice, a little bit darker. Get a nice gray going here. I'm starting off pretty dark because I don't want to have too much of a contrast between that and the black. Do a little bit above the eye and the kind of eyebrow area here. Go up and over the head. Come back around here. Definitely do some on this, though probably won't show up because the head will be behind the backpack. But we're gonna just kind of get around here. Similarly, I'm going to do some on all of these elements so they stand out a little bit when you're viewing it. Now I'm mixing kind of an ivory color into the black. I think it gives me like almost a nicer gray than the white. I'm just gonna add just a tiny bit more. Should do like one little stripe. Okay, so now got a little bit of a gray highlight on there. And I'm going to go back with just a little bit of black to clean it up. And then we'll apply some black wash to the metallic bits. And that should be good for us to do the eye lenses. This particular head doesn't have the hair, which to us the kind of like top knot hair is like a personal favorite thing. So I tried to include as many as I could, but this guy was a little bit simpler. So, okay. Now I'm going to suffer and try to paint the eye lenses. I'm going to get a little bit of the Stegadon Scale Green, which is my base color for them. Give me 1 second. Okay. So usually how I do something like eyes is I have to mess up first. So I'll try my best to fill the, let's see if I can zoom. Try to fill the whole kind of compartment. With the color. Then we're going to go to our second mix, which I have a little bit left here on the palette. I hope I can get it to work. Okay, it's coming through well. Try to paint just across like the eyeball. Mix in a little more of that bright green. Okay. I feel like that's the core color. And for the test model, we went up to this really bright green for the eyeball. So I'm going to do bright green, which is like the Rogue Hobbies, Monument Hobbies collaboration color. Just like a very saturated, very bright green. And try to put one dot in the front. Got that side? Okay, let's see if we can do this one. appears to me that the right eye, so yeah, his right is a little bit higher than the left. But I feel like ultimately that's not too bad. I feel like that'll do. Especially, I mean, right here the camera zoomed in a lot. On the tabletop running when viewing, it won't be too bad. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out a little bit now. Okay. So I'm actually gonna put the head in the body for the rest of it. That way we can kind of get a sense of how we're gonna do this. I'm gonna go ahead and apply the black wash again. So you can see I still have some of the oil wash. All I'm gonna do is add a little bit more thinner. And that hopefully will kind of reinvigorate it. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So you can see it kind of flowing down there. Okay, I'm gonna get most of it off the brush. And then I don't want to ruin the pink that I've done, but I do want to make sure I can take down a lot of this metal. And especially around the grill and these tubes on this side. Even because I highlighted gray, I'm gonna put a little bit on the helmet. And I think that'll help kind of add some dimension there. Okay, so for this moment, that'll be good. What I'm gonna do is gonna go back to my black here, take down the highlight. Okay. Perfect. All right. So we've got that. What do I want to do? After a while, when that dries, I'll go highlight the metal again. But I think we can add a little bit of a gray highlight to some of these elements. Just you can even see, kind of block everything out. The lights in the rooms themselves kind of show like what a highlight in here might look like. So I'm actually gonna just paint that in. So what I'm doing here, instead of turning the model, I'm only doing, it's like the turning it from above. That way I can kind of just see where light would hit if I'm looking at it on the table. And then for the purpose of creating a little bit more of a highlight here, this real thin, I'm just gonna do like one area right here, then maybe one on here. I feel like with some of these elements, you can kind of do like two angles. That's how I do the armor. I kind of look like one if he's looking one way, one if he's looking another, instead of kind of keeping all of my highlights as if they were. I think that that kind of allows the model to look somewhere between perfect in one angle and more just like interesting from anyway, but not flat. It's like it's still done with reference to being viewed from above. Okay, I'm just gonna take a moment here. Hmm. Okay. One thing I haven't done is do like a really bright silver highlight yet, just to make some of the elements pop. I know I contradict what I say all the time of, I don't want it to be too bright, but I think just a little. And sometimes a little means a little more than I like, but I feel that then when you look at the model, you just see these like really like pops of color. And I think that's kind of fun. Like where I highlighted all of the ridges of the chain with the original silver color before I had done the wash, I'll just like touch each part like only in one spot with the brightest silver. That way there's just kind of like this cascade of highlights that looks interesting when you see it at first glance. Similarly, like the very top of this kneecap here, I mean, you see that it kind of pops. And then similarly, if we're looking from above, we can do a little bit here. I think we could also highlight just the top ridge of this and the top ridge of this one. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. This is where I feel like the true metallics can like really shine. Is with just that like very small highlight. So like in here, we'll just do as if the light's reflecting off that one right there. Just a tiny bit on the tassel. And then back here, I like these being pretty dark, but we can just add a little bit on the chains. And then I'm going to put just a little bit on the edge here. I can just touch the top of this one. I'm going to leave the tubes pretty dark though, because I think I like that a lot more. Okay. Now what I think is kind of the hard part is maybe the bolt pistol here, which is mainly metallic. So it's a little less ooh. Well, I said this earlier, but on the barrel, I kind of like to do like one side and also kind of like a view from the other side. Can do a little bit of a view from up here. Really just one on the table for if someone's like looking from above, that they just kind of see these things have like glinting, you know, just the highest points. Or like in here, a little bit in there. This side is facing down a lot, so there's really no time where you would see too much other than this edge at the top. So I'm going to focus a lot on there. So yeah, I do think that it kind of pops more. Okay. Okay, it looks like we can go ahead and do a little bit here. So I'm just gonna do the kind of the top of this decorative element. In each spot. Yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. Okay. So part of my challenge with this squad is I wanted to try my hand at doing some non-metallic gold. In order to achieve that, I went through a couple different color combos, and I wasn't like super happy with the results. Um, but I found some other people's recipes, and I really settled on specifically these two colors, Mornfang Brown and Uriel Yellow. Well, again, not a super fan of Citadel. Sometimes their colors can just be like there's just a couple that are real hits. And the other yellow I was using, which was actually Pro Acryl's Golden Yellow, just didn't really cut it. And similarly, this Mornfang Brown is a bit warmer, so it helps. But I personally like to start from my lowest with Pro Acryl's Mahogany. I think that the mahogany color adds a little bit of red, which helps it look, I think, richer and darker in the shadows. So I'm going to put all three of these on my palette first. That way I have plenty to work with. Because I feel that kind of like some other people say in their videos, like, you have to go back and forth a lot. Okay. So now I have the three colors I'm going to use on my wet palette. I've already begun by painting this hilt with a brown. I don't think it was quite the one I wanted at the time. I think it was just to kind of get a color in there. So I'm going to go ahead and restart with the mahogany. You can see that it's a lot more reddish, which is what I like. Okay. So I'm going to do is mix a little bit of the mahogany with a Mornfang Brown. Choose where my highlights are going to be. Here I definitely found toward the edges. In the middle. Clean that up a little bit. Okay. So going for the effect I did on the test model here, this time I feel like I want to push the highlights a little bit further, try to get a better effect. I feel like I almost used too much of the base color. I was looking at references just over the past couple days, and I feel that gold references tend to be like pretty bright over a lot of it. So I'm going to do a large highlight here at the bottom and another one here at the top. Okay. Slowly adding more yellow to the Mournfang brown and highlighting a smaller and smaller section. Also kind of start with a little bit of an edge highlight here. Okay, add a little bit more yellow, a little bit of water to thin it down. Okay. It's definitely going to be getting closer to a bigger highlight. Still, I might bring down the edge highlight a little bit. On this side, I really want it to pop. You know what? I'm just going to take a break real quick, and I'm going to glue this head on. Okay. Get the pose so he's looking down the barrel. So make sure that's you. Yeah, just like that. Okay. When the head dries, I'll go ahead and try to finish up the non-metallic metal on the handguard here. Okay, so now we've got a pretty good highlight of like a 50-50 mix of the Mournfang brown and the Uriel yellow. I'm going to take it up a little bit more, and this is where it can become kind of difficult. Because I feel like you run out of space a little bit. But you also want contrast. So you don't want to go like too wide, I feel, with the brightest yellow, but you want to go pretty wide with the color before that. Because like in the real gold, there's not going to be too many patches that are actually brown. A lot of it is going to appear more golden, more yellow, at least from the references I was looking at. So I'm definitely going to put a good size highlight here. It's supposed to be just catching the edge and just going down a little bit. Okay. Now we're getting almost to pure aerial yellow. I'm going to thin it down a little bit. We're just going to go on the end. That was too much. Okay. Okay. And the final step is we mix in some kind of off-white cream color with Uriel yellow. And we use that for the final highlights. Just gonna do a little bit there. There. Fairly simple. I'm going to go back to our metallic. right. So this guy looks pretty good for today. Did some we did the metallics. We did some washes. We highlighted them again. We did both the bronze and the silver true metallic metal. We did the non-metallic metal on the sword hilt. I did just some quick colors on the tassels, and we did some painting on the sword. Just gonna clean that up real quick with some Stegodon scale green. Okay, we painted all of this trim. We did the bolt pistol. Probably one of the biggest things is we did the head and the eye lenses. Overall, he's looking pretty good. I'm going to be back tomorrow, and we'll do the base to match our test model here. That'd be really exciting. I'd really have fun with this base. And I'm looking forward to doing another one and being able to show you guys how we did it. I think before I go in a couple minutes, I'm just going to do just some last minute touch-ups. I was going to leave, but then I saw that I made some mistakes, and I want to feel good going stopping here. And also, like here, I didn't do enough highlighting, I feel, on the handle of the dagger. Could also do a little more. In here. And then I'm going to do some black on the belt buckle, just because you can see I got some metallic on it. Then a little more in Fang Brown. Do it here. And I think just a really quick brown wash on the leather. Just gonna use some Reichland Flesh Shade Gloss. Just add a little bit more depth here. Okay. It's looking pretty good. Let's see if there's anything else we want to do. All right. Well, I'll see you guys tomorrow.